I'd like to thank the Pacific Wolf Coalition and the University of Washington for inviting me here today and for noticing the work that I and colleagues have done on the effects of loss of breeder wolves on packs and populations. I guess I was a little surprised when I was notified out of the blue to give a talk on a paper that's now 6 years old. And it was a good opportunity because we just published another paper on the same topic based on just the Denali wolf population in Alaska. So this is an opportunity to be able to present both of those papers together. So yeah, these are the two papers. The first one is entitled The Effects of Breeder Loss on Wolves. And that was a paper that was very much a group effort, 20 co-authors plus myself from around the world, many colleagues from Scandinavia, where I worked as a research biologist for a number of years with the Scandinavian Wolf Project. Also, some co-authors are in the room, Doug Smith, Carter Niemeyer. So this is basically what I call a meta-analysis. It's basically gleaning the literature and our own data sets because it is a difficult question to address. Individual sample sizes in projects are relatively small, and in order to really look at this, you need to have a large data set. The second paper, as I've alluded to, came out this year in the Journal of Animal Ecology. It's still just published online and hasn't come out in paper format yet, by Bridget Borg, who is a National Park Service biologist in Denali Park, myself, the late Tom Meyer, who was a wolf biologist in Denali National Park for a number of years and also worked as part of the Rocky Mountains recovery team with Ed Banks and Carter and Doug and others earlier, and so he was also co-author on the effects of breeder loss paper, as well as Laura Prue, who is a professor at the University of Alaska. See if I can get this thing to work. I'm probably doing something wrong here, obviously. Oop. Sorry about that. Anyway. So basically, these two papers look at the effects of breeder loss at two levels of organization, one being the pack level. And the parameters that we examined were recruitment as specified by pup survival to 1 year of age, reproduction as quantified through whether or not they denned or not, pack cohesion, whether a pack stayed together or split following a breeder loss event. The population level, we looked at short-term, basically 1 year versus long-term, greater than 1 year effects relative to population status also, saturated versus recolonizing populations. The meta-analysis paper, the first paper from 2008, we looked at a pooled data set of 148 breeding wolves, 75 males and 73 females from Europe and North America. Data were gleaned from the literature and co-author files spanning 1970 to 2002. Co-authors responded to a data solicitation that I sent out in that context. We assessed impacts of wolf pup survival, reproduction, and territorial packs. So this is the data set broken down by study areas. Denali National Park and Kenai Peninsula in Alaska were our saturated wolf populations. We also have data from Yellowstone National Park and northwestern Montana, as well as the Great Lakes, Wisconsin, northeastern Minnesota, and northwestern Minnesota, Scandinavia, which is Norway and Sweden, as well as one episode from Greece. In Denali Park, we have a 26-year data set of 387 wolves that were radiocollared. Some of the data were also used in the earlier paper in 2008 that we wrote. Here we also study the effects of breeder loss on social stability, denning and recruitment, and population growth. And this is Bridget Borg in her natural habitat in Denali Park. So we looked at, in the meta-population paper, meta-analysis paper, we looked at causes of mortality of cases where breeding wolves were lost. We found that most of the loss could be characterized as anthropogenic, and you see highlighted in the yellow that the illegal kill legal kill and lethal control comprised the majority of the anthropogenic mortality. There were also some capture-related mortalities, euthanasia, translocation mortality, and vehicle collisions, but the majority of it was intentional kill, legal or illegal, management or otherwise. Natural mortality, it's significant to note that wolves do kill other wolves, and in that context here we see that most of the natural mortality that was accounted for was through intraspecific strife. So from this larger meta-analysis, we have 56% anthropogenic mortality, 44% natural. And when we look at Denali, we see basically the opposite situation where you have a protected population only harvested on the periphery of the park, mainly on the eastern side as it abuts the park's highway. And so for the most part, breeder loss was a natural event. It happened either through interspecific strife, encounters with prey that ended poorly for the wolf, avalanches, etc. So recall also that breeders are lost naturally in populations. It's not something that only happens when people kill wolves. So here we see that, this is the situation throughout the year. The highest anthropogenic mortality occurred in the spring and in the winter, whereas natural mortality occurred mostly in the fall. I'm not sure why, but that's the way the data show, what the data show. The meta-analysis paper, we showed that, surprisingly, that in 84% of cases, pups survived the loss of one or both breeders. The sex of the lost breeder did not influence the outcome. Pup survival was greatest in packs with more than six or more wolves. The presence of adult non-breeders did enhance wolf pup survival. So the pup age and the number of adult-sized wolves were the most important factors influencing pup survival that we found in the meta-analysis paper. Just to click forward. We measured recruitment in the Denali wolf paper. We found, and in this case, we actually had a control, and that is, we were able to examine packs that did not lose breeders versus packs that did lose breeders to see if there was a difference or was a significant difference. On the far left, I'm not sure if I can, there, on the far left you see that for the situations where one or both breeders are lost, recruitment was only 70%, whereas for the control it was over 90, almost 95%. So when both breeders are intact, recruitment, pup survival is much higher than in cases where one of the breeders or both breeders in some cases were lost. These are average numbers. And in the meta-analysis, we found something in between because it's a much larger and heterogeneous data set. So there, like I said, about 84% of pups survived a breeder loss event. Following breeder loss in the meta-analysis paper, we found that 47% of wolf packs reproduced the next year. 56% reproduced when one breeder was lost. However, only 9% reproduced when both breeders were lost. That's kind of, not surprising, frankly. When you lose both breeders, that's going to have a more serious impact. Group size in reproductive packs was greater than in non-reproductive packs by a factor of about 2. The frequency of reproduction differed between cases where one breeder was lost at about 58% and where both breeders were lost at 20%, when the next denning season was less than 3 months away, which we'll get to now with Denali again. Oops, did I go the wrong way there? Yeah. I'm sorry, that's getting lost here in the shuffle. Right. So when we look at reproduction again, the Denali pack, 80% produced following breeder loss in Denali, and in the Denali control, that was way over 95, 97%, I believe. So again, you see a clear effect of breeder loss in the Denali population. We did not have control sample for the meta-analysis. You see that actually the level of reproduction across that heterogeneous sample was much lower, less than 50%. So reproduction, the impacts on reproduction are going to vary from population to population, I think, is part of the take-home message here. And we're generalizing across the meta-analysis paper, and then we're looking again at a specific population in Alaska in a saturated wolf population. As far as pack dissolution is concerned, packs breaking up, in the meta-analysis paper, we found that 38% of packs dissolved and abandoned their territories after breeder loss. And of the dissolved groups, territorial wolves became reestablished in 25 cases, or about 53%, and in an additional 10 cases, or 21%, neighboring wolves usurped vacant territories. So the proportion of wolves dissolving, grouped packs dissolving, did not differ between sexes in cases where one breeder was lost. Again, here, these are average numbers. I'm not showing the error bars around these, but basically, we found that larger packs were more apt to split when they lost a breeder. So we see that the average size for packs that actually split into 2 packs was over 9 animals in a pack. They did not split on average when it was about 5.5 animals. The opposite happened when you had small packs. If one breeder or more were lost, they tend to dissolve at small pack sizes of about 2.5, well, around 2 animals, which makes sense. And then they tended to remain cohesive at about between 5 and 6 animals. We did see that the proportion of packs that dissolved was much lower for cases where one breeder was lost, and we didn't see any effect of sex on that in the meta-analysis paper, whereas clearly when you lose both breeders, it's pretty disastrous for a pack, and so most of these packs dissolved. Breeder loss in Denali preceded 77% of cases of pack dissolution from 1986 to 2012. Packs were more likely to dissolve if a female or both breeders were lost and pack size was small. Packs were 1.6 times more likely to persist if breeders died of natural rather than anthropogenic causes, which we found rather intriguing. And so harvest actually increased the probability of pack dissolution, and this was primarily a result of the timing, which was coincident with breeding season in winter and spring. So here we have a graph that's a little bit hard to digest, but basically what it says is that this is basically the probability of pack maintenance. We have males in blue, females in this brown color here, and then cases where both breeders were lost in this gray. And we found that less than 50, or there was a chance of P less than 0.5 for pack persistence if pack size was less than 11 members for both. So about right here. And 6 if female was lost, up there. The persistence ratio then was basically that if you lost a male, it was of dramatically less consequence for a pack than if you lost a female in the Denali population. There's something that was kind of obscured in our larger data set, but you can clearly see it here, that we're using a base of 1 for both breeders lost, that being the most dramatic, and then you can see the difference between female and male here, that most dramatic losing a male, pretty dramatic losing a female, a lot less dramatic losing a male is basically what the point of that slide is. Then we also looked at time to breeder replacement. In the meta-analysis paper, we found that for small recolonizing populations, the time to breeder loss was significantly longer. The time to breeder replacement was significantly longer than for recolonizing populations of less than 75 wolves relative to larger recolonizing populations and saturated populations. We didn't detect any significant differences between these two. However, we did between recolonizing in both of these. And you know, these two parameters are obviously linked, and so we also found a similarity here with the time to the next reproduction being over 2 years, roughly, for small recolonizing populations relative to about a year for both larger recolonizing and the saturated Alaskan populations on the Kenai and in Denali. So again, this just shows the relationship between the number of months it takes to replace breeders and the subsequent next reproduction. Time varied a lot early. I mean, in the smaller populations, quite a variation here. We had one case in Norway where a female, a pack lost a breeder, I think, through illegal mortality, through poaching, and it took 5 years for the breeder to, I'm not sure actually, I'm trying to think now. Yeah, 5 years, I believe, for the breeder to be replaced. And it was an isolated pack. I guess I might inject here at this point that Norway is the European analog to Utah. I worked in Norway in wildlife management and research for 20 years. I worked for the Hunters Association for a number of years, working also on large carnivore management issues through that organization. Worked in the Scandinavian Wolf Project, Norwegian Institute for Nature Research for a number of years. The breeder loss paper basically was, the impetus for that was that Norwegian managers wanted to know what the effect of breeder loss was. And guess how many wolf packs is the national goal for Norway? 3. So 1 more than Utah. So anyway, just thought I'd interject that. So yeah, again, kind of something that common sense really, you know, you can understand this from a common sense viewpoint that basically when you've got small populations, and one thing that we haven't looked at, and certainly there's a lot of data now, someone else could do a new analysis and bring in the spatial component to look at what is the effect of distance between nearest neighbor packs and you know, breeder replacement and time to next reproduction, and you might have an opportunity here in Washington or in the Northwest to do that with a new data set. We didn't do that with this, but I think you'd probably find, as we saw, just scrutinizing the data, that packs that are very isolated are going to be more vulnerable than those that are near other packs. But we didn't look at that in our analyses. In the Denali paper, we found also that there was no effect on the population, either the year of breeder loss or the year after, but either in terms of population growth relative to breeder mortality rate or pack dissolution rate. So pretty flat curves here for both. So these are pretty much non-significant correlations. Again, recall that, you know, the Denali Park population is pretty much protected. It's also embedded in a large Alaskan population, which is pretty much continuous in all directions in mainland Alaska. So wolves are flowing in from other areas, as are Denali Park wolves are, of course, dispersing out. So it's part of a much larger population. It's harvested on the periphery. Harvest levels vary. They're pretty low generally around the park. So a conclusion of the Denali paper was that population growth rates were largely unaffected by breeder loss and pack dissolution despite reduced reproductive rates, which indicate that there are strong compensatory mechanisms that can reduce the negative impacts of breeder loss in socially complex species such as wolves. So in conclusion, we can say that wolves are a highly resilient species with a high reproductive potential. They have evolved to cope with breeder loss. Breeder replacement and hence reproduction appears to be a function of population size and recolonizing populations. Thus, small isolated packs will be more likely to disappear if one or both breeders are lost than in larger ones that occur adjacent to or near other packs. That's basically my speculation. It's not really borne out in our data, but just like I say, from the experience of looking at these data, that seems to be the case. But I think, again, this could be an opportunity for new research to look at that more closely. I think it is relevant to state it as being probable. Breeder loss is thus more significant in smaller recolonizing populations than in large saturated ones. There is evidence that loss of male breeders is less important for continued pack persistence than the loss of female breeders. Losing both breeders in a short time interval clearly has the strongest effects on packs, no matter what time of year. And likewise, short-term effects on reproduction and pack cohesion may occur if breeders are killed in late winter or spring, which was interesting to see in the Denali population. And we should remember that pups mature quickly and are able to fend for themselves by 6 months of age. I think the youngest pair or youngest pup to survive in the the meta-analysis paper, I think it lost its parents in October. I think both parents, but it was also, I believe, feeding on garbage, so it had some supplemental food there. Pup survival may be compromised if both breeders are lost when pups are less than 6 months old and there are no auxiliary pack members, yearling siblings or older. More research on this issue is required. So as I said, data from your recolonizing populations in the Pacific Northwest could be useful to look more closely at this issue. So management implications for recovering populations, which of course this is again dependent upon management objectives. You probably should limit lethal control to solitary individuals or territorial pairs where possible, because selective removal of pack members can be difficult. Of course, if you can take out an entire pack in an area and that fits with management objectives, that is one way to do it, but it really depends on your management objectives and your population as a whole and the distribution of packs, etc. Only removing wolves from reproductive packs, you should only remove wolves from reproductive packs when pups are more than 6 years old and packs contain at least 6 members, including at least 3 adult-sized wolves. I mean, ideally. Such packs should also be close to neighboring packs and occur within larger wolf populations if possible. And you should avoid removing wolves during the breeding season, as this may have disproportionate impacts on pack fate and slow population growth. Well, this is a little confusing because we're saying basically that pups should be more than 6 months of age, and then we're saying that you should avoid the breeding season. So that means you've got January. So it kind of comes back to really what your objectives are. These are just guidelines or recommendations. They're not chiseled in stone, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.